Reminiscences of Sault Ste Marie, 1820, by George Johnston. Read by Frank Blissett. In the month of July, 1820, a number of canoes appeared ascending the river Sainte Marie. Also a large Mackinac boat containing a force of 20 soldiers under the command of Lieutenant John S. Pierce of the Artillery, United States Army, forming an escort to His Excellency Lewis Cass and his party. His Excellency was at this time governor of the Territory of Michigan and bound on an expedition to discover the sources of the Mississippi. The party landed opposite the present site where Fort Brady is now situated and formed their camp on the green near the shore of the Sainte Marie River and within gunshot of the Indian village situated on an elevated bank, and at this season of the year was well populated by the Indians who had arrived from the different regions of the country from their winter hunting excursions. And besides the local population, many little fleets of canoes having arrived from the north and southern shores of Lake Superior on their way down to visit their English father at Drummond Island, and to receive their annual presents from the British government, and this annual assemblage of Indians were now encamped on either side of the river, dotting the shores with their wigwams, and the probable assemblage of Indians at this time could not have been less than 1,500 men capable of bearing arms. My father, John Johnston, Esquire, being absent from home, I called on His Excellency, the Governor, and invited him and his party to partake of the hospitalities of our home, and on the following morning I received a message from the Governor desiring me to attend the contemplated council he was to hold with the Indians. I accordingly and forthwith, in the company of our clerk, Mr. Holliday, repaired to His Excellency's camp, and we were requested to enter his marquee and placed on either side of his seat. Soon the chiefs and headmen came and took their seats on the ground, forming a semicircle in the marquee and right in front of His Excellency. And soon after the chiefs and headmen seated themselves, the interpreter was ordered to bring in some tobacco for the chiefs to smoke, and the interpreter, agreeably to his instructions, brought in an armful of plug tobacco, and which he threw upon the ground and within the Indian circle. At this time I observed standing near the marquee door a young chief, Sasaba, dressed in full British uniform, and appeared too important a character to take a seat on the ground with the elder chiefs. At this time one of the head men observed, and casting his eye on the pile of tobacco before him, I presume, said he, that this tobacco is designed for our smoking, and, drawing one of the plugs of tobacco toward him with his long pipe stem and taking it in his hand, drew his scalping knife from his belt and commenced cutting the tobacco. And at this instant, Sasaba, stepping inside the marquee, shoved the tobacco lying on the ground with his foot, and addressing himself to the head man who was cutting the tobacco, and with a frown, said to him, "How dare you accept of tobacco thrown on the ground as bones to dogs?" And instantly wheeling around, he walked off towards the village and hoisted the British colors, and while the chiefs and all were amazed at Sasaba's course, it was reported to General Cass that the British flag was hoisted and waving in the Indian village, and so soon did the general spring to his feet. Calling his interpreter to accompany him, they marched toward the village, and Lieutenant Pierce and his men sprung to their arms. This broke up the council, and the chiefs dispersed. The jingling of the ramrods in the muskets soon reached the ears of the women and children at the village, and the affrighted began to fly to their canoes lying on the beach, and which were shoved off, and the women and children rushing promiscuously and screaming into the canoes and paddling off. The lamentations of the screaming women and the brawling children set the dogs howling, and the riverside became a perfect scene of confusion. In the meantime, the British flag was hauled down by the general. At this time I walked home, and I met my mother opposite my office, and she, appearing much agitated, accosted me, saying, "For God's sake, George, send instantly for the elder chiefs, for that foolish young chief, Sasaba, will bring ruin to the tribe, and get them assembled here." I immediately dispatched messengers for the chiefs and elders, and the chiefs, soon obeying the summons, were assembled in my office, and I addressed them with the following words: "My friends and relatives, I am young and possess very little wisdom to give you advice at this present time. It is from you I should receive it. But on this occasion allow me to give you a few words of warning, and I do not design to be lengthy. A few words will suffice. You are all of you aware that hostilities between Great Britain and the United States have ceased. Peace now exists. The two nations are now living on friendly terms. One of your young men has misbehaved himself and has given a gross insult to the government of Michigan, a representative of the President of the United States, by hoisting the British flag on his acknowledged territory. You cannot expect that the British government will sustain him in such an act. I understand that he has gone to arm himself and raise warriors. Now be wise and quick, and put a stop to his wild scheme, and suppress the rising of your young men. The firing of one gun will bring ruin to your tribe and to the Chippewas, so that a dog will not be left to howl in your villages." My mother at this time came in, and with authority commanded the assembled chiefs to be quick and suppress the follies of Sasaba, the chief. Shingwekaus, the orator of the tribe, and who had been a partisan during the past war, was selected with other braves, and they had orders from the chiefs to stop Sasaba's proceedings. And they forthwith started upon the portage road, and they met Sasaba, who, having divested himself of his regimentals, and now appearing painted and in war accoutrements, leading a party of warriors, prepared and determined for a desperate encounter with General Cass. Shingwekaus, on meeting Sasaba and addressing the party with him, said to them, "My friends and relatives, I am authorized by our chiefs and elders to stop your proceedings." Sasaba, instantly replying, said to Shingwekaus, "You were a war leader when my brother fell in battle. He was killed by the Americans, and how dare you come to put a stop to my proceedings?" And raising his war club, struck at Shingwekaus and grazed his left shoulder, and Shingwekaus, undismayed, still kept up his oration, and with his eloquence and the power vested him by the chiefs, he prevailed on the party to return quietly to their respective lodges, then situated at the head of the portage and along the shore of the falls. Soon after this, a messenger sent by the chiefs came to me and reported that Sasaba's party had retired quietly to their respective wigwams, and in the afternoon I assembled the chiefs in my office, and told them it was necessary for them to make an apology to General Cass, and to listen to what he had to say to them, and if they found anything adverse to their principles, it was their time to reject in a proper manner the propositions he should make to them, and to this they assented. And I offered them my office as a council room, and which they gratefully accepted. I then called on General Cass, and stated to him that the chiefs were assembled at my office, and were ready to hear his words, and I suggested to the general that my office would be a convenient place to transact business in, and I invited him and his suite. And repairing therein, the chiefs making an appropriate apology for the conduct of their foolish young chief, was accepted by General Cass, and business matters commenced, and the treaty of June 16, 1820, was consummated between the parties. I recollect sending for 2 bottles of wine and tobacco, and those of us present pledged ourselves with the chiefs, and smoking the pipe of peace with them, ended our day's work. That was Reminiscences of Sault Ste Marie, 1820, by George Johnston. Read by Frank Blissett.